I just want to say right off the bat, thank you, Harriet, and thank everybody who invited me out and made it really easy to come out and meet with you all. I've met a lot of really nice folks out here, a lot of sharp farmers, and you know, in New York we sort of have this complex that all the real farming goes on in the Midwest, and we're just back there playing around, and the heavy-duty farmers are all out here. So for me, it's very intimidating to come speak to you all because we all feel like a bunch of frauds just playing in the mud. So, and special thanks to Erin being a really great host. And as I said before, I think this is a really, really awesome group, and you guys should be proud of her and support this. And this is a really great way to learn from other farmers, and some of the best learning I've ever done. And the reason I come out to these things is to meet farmers and learn from farmers, because the one thing I know about farming is that as soon as I think I know everything about farming, it humbles me and teaches me that I really don't know that much about farming. And I've got the kind of brain that always likes a new challenge, and if that's you, and I bet you it is most of you, then every year is a new set of rules that come down, and we adapt and try to do the best we can, and we learn a lot of hard lessons. And actually, you know, it's been the great humbling experience of my life and a privilege to farm for a living. So I'm gonna talk to you about what I do in New York, and I'm not going to stand up here and say that every farm should do this, or that this necessarily translates exactly into what would happen in the Midwest. I know my friend John and Haley are doing this in Wisconsin, or a similar concept to what we're doing, but it is a model that's worked for us. And there may be a few things in here, looking at my crop rotation and how we market our small grains, that gives one of you an idea or two ideas, and then the whole trip I made will really be worth it. So I've already feel like I've introduced myself a couple of times, but in case there's anybody here who doesn't know who I am, I live in central Finger Lakes region of New York. So we're about 4.5 hours northwest of New York City. Down in the corner there where it says New York, we have the weird title of having the same name as our state as our city. So when you say you're from New York, out-of-staters think you're from New York City, so we call ourselves upstate New Yorkers to distinguish ourselves. So a little history of my farm. I talked about this in the last thing. I started out as a 150 cow conventional dairy out of college. That didn't work out. I moved to Ithaca, ran a VW Audi shop, and that's how I financed my way into farming. My dad was a 6th grade social studies teacher, so there wasn't a farm in the family to inherit, so we started growing vegetables in '93 organic, and I started 100% farm income in 2003. And we're doing 1,400 acres and all certified organic. We, of course, always have a little bit of transitional ground as well. So that's kind of the brief history of my farm. It's obviously taken me a long time to get here, but it's really been a lot of fun. So there's a picture of my farmstead, just so you can get an idea. You can see there's lots of hills. I've got a lot of small fields, a lot of challenging soils. Of course, I get land envy when I come out to the Midwest and see all the really incredible ground you guys get to work in. This is nothing that's going to happen to me probably in my lifetime to get to do that, but our soils are almost exclusively HEL. We've got 5 to 15% slopes, a lot of strips. Real challenge to farm there. One of our bigger challenges is the extra large soil particles. So, yeah, I know this is a horrifying sight to you Midwesterners, but this is what I wake up to every morning. So I counted, actually, last year we were putting in some buckwheat. I took 48 loads of stone off of an 11-acre field. So if there was an Olympic rock picking event, this guy right here would represent the US, because I can pick stones like a madman with that thing. I love it. It's like Pac-Man all over again. You go out there. So we've also got some extra large particles. So we usually pull about 10 of those up every year, or we hit them with the plow and the whole plow comes up out of the ground. We dig them up. I got one, I went in with a backhoe and tried to get it, and I couldn't find the bottom of it, so now we just scrape over the top of it. So that said, there's some corn. You can see all those stones in there. This makes row crop cultivating just a total bitch. I mean, it is really difficult to throw soil, get soil to flow, beats the snot out of your equipment, causes you all sorts of headaches. That said, we can pretty consistently grow 120 bushel corn. I realize for the Midwest that isn't very much, but the other thing I'll say is about this land, it can be difficult, but I was having a beer with a couple of guys who were talking about land rents, and then we did a little calculation. So on that 1,400 acres, we calculated my average land rent is only $17. So that said, I would probably trade that in for not having to pick all those stones up. So, there you go. So there's, these steep, stony soils. So this is what kind of, each farm has its own ecosystem, right? It's like your own country or your own planet. So you have to tailor. You've got positive and negatives. So you tailor that to what you've got. And that sort of pigeonholed me into, I'm not going to grow a lot of soybeans. I have a few fields that it works on and a couple 100 acres, but a lot of this it's small grain territory. So, the challenge on my farm was how to take this ground and how do we make this work both in a rotation and both to make net farm income something that's sustainable as well. So these are some of the crops we grow. We grow a real wide variety of stuff. Corn and all different types of wheat, soft white, hard red spring, rye, buckwheat. Down there you can see we do a bunch of grass mixed hay, kernza and perennial rye. I mean, that's a very small part of it. And then we do some triticale, and we grow Japanese millet for seed, which is a really fun crop. These are some of the cover crops we use on our farm. Red clover, crimson annual, a bunch of forage rape and forage turnips, buckwheat, oats, a whole bunch of stuff. I love all these cover crops. I mean, I think one of the really fun parts about crop farming is having a lot of different things to grow, see how they work into your system. To me, this is all, the more the better kind of deal. So I got involved also in value-added enterprises. I started a flour mill as an attempt to raise the price of the wheat that we get on our farm to make it sustainable, and I have two partners in that. We started it in 2009, and then a couple years later, through a friend of mine who's a really good home baker, he was making such good bread with our flour that me and him hatched a plan and started a bakery. So I also a part owner in a bakery as well. So not that I go over there and need dough ever, but these are businesses that I've created to create a market for myself to market my crops. And there's a picture of our mill. It's not a big mill. It's kind of a Rube Goldberg special, lots of duct tape and tubes all over the place. But we do I think about 900 tons of flour a year, which sounds like a lot, but I bet you ADM does that in about 30 seconds. So there's a little picture inside the mill of our production area. We grind with stones, artisan bread flour, and we'll talk a little more about that if I don't run out of time. There's a picture of the bakery, a nice buckwheat crop growing around it. They market direct, and we use a CSB, or a consumer supported bakery model there, where people buy 20 weeks of bread and they get a different loaf every week. That's my partner Stefan, and he hand built that stove. It's built on a Portuguese wood-fired design. And my grandfather came over from Germany and was a baker. And I wish he could have met Stefan, because they would have had a lot to talk about. And my grandpa made really good bread, and he makes good bread too. So I'm going to go quickly through my cropping system. Joel, that was an awesome talk about crop rotation. So I was going to talk about crop rotation, but I'm not going to go through the same thing twice with you. I'll just sort of show you what I feel like are some important things, and I think what I think are important things are the same thing Joel pointed out to you. And I think he really did hit all the spots that I would have hit as well. You know, diversity, the nutrient demands up and down, tillage dates, keeping weeds off balance, bare fallow period, and the buckwheat, really important. We use a really long rest period for our soils. You know, you'll see how the rotation lines up. It gives us 36 months of no tillage on the ground to let it regain structure. And lots of cover crops. Big thing is flexibility. I mean, I have this bunch of different rotations I use, but you got to be able to abandon ship and go to plan B, like we've all been talking about. And so that's really important, because especially with weather, different markets, I might get an order, some guy wants more rye or more wheat, so I might be switching back and forth there. Demand on labor and machinery. It's me and 2 guys farming all this ground spread out over 25 acres. So we're running like crazy once the season starts, and to try to plant all something at once, spread out that far, for us personally wouldn't work. One thing that Joel didn't talk about is, because we've got so many strips, we have to figure the crop rotation out so that no two strips are plowed up at the same time. So that's just something you need to think about if you're in that situation. And of course, we always want to have something growing. Here's a little look at a couple of our different rotations. We go corn with ryegrass interseeded in it, and I'm going to go through some slides and I picked out a couple of points on each one of these crops that I thought was important. Into buckwheat on the second year, or you could go into soybeans, we'd sometimes do on our better ground, into winter wheat with clover underseeded, and then 1 or 2 years of red clover. And then right there, we've got this nice little spot where we can either put in a cover crop, or if the red clover is looking good, then we might leave that in and then go into spring wheat in the next spring. And after the spring wheat, that gives us a nice little period in time there after we've combined that to put a cover crop mix in, or do something fun with that. Sometimes we'll we'll put clover back in, and then go back into corn. So those are kind of our basic rotations. And there's also, I think Joel hit on this, where you can get a nice bare fallow period after the spring wheat comes off. Like right in the summer when it's really dry is a great time to kill rhizomes as well. Just a little spot in there. So this is just a little slide where I just took one aspect of my thing, varying planting dates. So there's our rotation year after year, and I just highlighted at what point in the year those different crops are planted. And if you look at that over the rotation, there's really no 2 crops that are planted at exactly the same time, except for that corn when it comes back in. And that, to me, has been really big in terms of never giving these weeds the same conditions 2 years in a row so they can really get a hold. I mean, you talk about corn and soybeans, you're given the same weeds, the same conditions every year. And that's in organic, that is going to bite you in the ass. I can guarantee it. You need to really vary these things. And I could have made another slide with using heavy feeders and light feeders. You never want to build too many nutrients in the soil, or have heavy feeder. That's a guaranteed way to have a lot of weeds. This is in my experience, and I'm sure there's other people that could have something different on their farm, but this is what we've found over the years. So first year of corn, heavy feeder. We grow a lot of these polenta type varieties. And the thing I wanted to point out here is this gives us a nice opportunity to get a cover crop in. So There's our nice stony soil with the corn growing in it. The way we've been able to establish this really successfully is on our last cultivation. We just run behind the cultivator with another tractor with a spinner on it and just broadcast the annual ryegrass right into that fluffy, stony mix that we've created on that last cultivation. And then what happens is the corn kind of canopies over and the ryegrass just stays kind of spindly underneath. And the first year I did it, I didn't think it was going to amount to much. But then as that canopy opens up and you get some real moisture in the fall, this stuff really takes off. And does a really nice job of covering. The nice part about broadcasting it is it gets in the row as well. You know, I see these cedars that they put 1 or 2 strips down the center. This is a complete coverage of the soil. You'll see after you get the corn off, that's kind of what it looked like. Now, we were talking about resiliency in livestock. If you had some beef cattle, this stuff is soft and green. It's got a huge root mass. And I like this because it adds organic matter. It actually can give you some traction in the fall if it's wet. It captures and holds a lot of N that maybe the corn plant didn't get that would leach out over the winter. So this has been effective for us. I don't see why it wouldn't work in the Midwest, but what I'd like to do is hook up an air seeder to the back of my cultivator to put it in right behind the cultivator at last cultivation, and then we wouldn't have to run around again with a tractor. I pretty much would, hopefully most of you saw the little bit I did on buckwheat. I kind of went over this last year and last time I talked, and the day before I went over it. So this is buckwheat. This for us is absolutely essential in our rotation. I would never not have buckwheat. You know, and also, as I said yesterday when I talked about it, this gives us a really cool opportunity to do some no-till. And this has, for us, been incredibly successful, going right into the buckwheat stubble after we harvest it, and nice fluffy. There's nothing as fluffy as soil after buckwheat. It's got a very fine root system. You know, when we transition ground, buckwheat is the first crop that goes in. So we get that winter wheat, or we could establish rye there. We could do triticale. This is, again, a heavy feeder. So we went from heavy feeder to light feeder, back to heavy feeder. This gives us an opportunity to put some layer manure down. We like to get that seeded in by early October, get good tillering, especially for rye. We always chop our straw back on there. Now I just found out my big take-home lesson is that all this organic matter, or maybe I thought I was building with straw, maybe isn't being built because that's too much old material. So we should probably start baling it. And then we're going to frost seed clover in there. And we've been putting a little Chilean on in the early spring before the bacteria really started mineralizing the N in the soil to give the crop a little boost. And that's been a huge yield booster for us personally, just to green up. So that's showed that slide yesterday. There's that wheat coming up in the buckwheat stubble, no tilled in. We always frost seed clover. This is the simplest no-till you'll ever do. You let the frost till it in for you. And that's what you end up with, take it off, and we've got always a nice clover crop in here. I've actually never had this not work. So then we get to the part of our rotation where we're going to give the soil a little break. You know, we've beat it up pretty good in our bare fallow. We've cultivated it a bunch of times, and I think it's important to, well, as they were calling it in England, a lay. This, I guess, would be our lay. Thing I like about red clover, it's got a nice taproot, breaks up the soil as it goes down. Of course, fixes nitrogen, and then can stay in for 1 to 2 years. And that's not counting the establishment year. We did a 4 variety trial on a farm that hadn't had clover, and there was a German red clover called Millivis that was the most persistent, and I'm sure they've maybe come out with some other ones, but we really like that variety. And so if we get our no-till in, we've got that 36 months of rest that we put in with our red clover. And we're going to harvest that for hay the first year, and then We're going to do a little work on getting some clover seed out of there. I try to, if I can, make my cover crops pay a little bit as they go along, so we can sell this. We make a lot of round bale silage. And then the second growth, we go in with a disc bine, actually, and we cut it and swath it and let it dry out in the early fall to combine the seed off of it. So that's what the windrow looks like after it's been dried for a while. You want to let it get all kind of black and funky. If you're going to windrow it, put it together. We lay it out flat and then windrow it with a dew on it so you don't break up the seed heads. You can see all those little clover seed heads in there. I'd say yields are higher on a dry year, at least in New York. I don't know about the Midwest. And it's one dusty sucker when you go out there and combine that. You got to set your combine up with clover screens inside, bottom sieve, and the pre-cleaners. You need 3mm sieves. You can get them from Deere, I'm sure. IH has them. So we'll go through and combine that, and then typical yields are 100 to 250 pounds per acre at $3 a pound. You know, you haven't done that much. It's a cover crop. That's a pretty good income, and that's something that, you know, we just sell it to other farmers. We clean it on farm and sell it on. We've been pretty successful with that. So that year 6 is going to be spring wheat, and that's we talked about frost seeding that into red clover, frost planting it. Typically what we're doing is plowing down red clover. Spring wheat likes a lot of nitrogen. So that red clover plow down, that's where we get our heavy, high nitrogen in New York anyway. We've sort of learned to trick it into, because it's so wet, wheat typically has lower nitrogen and or lower protein in wet years, and we have a lot of wet years, so the nitrogen really helps bring the protein levels up. And as I said before, this sort of allows us a bare fallow period. So one of the, I think it was fella Rye was asking me about keeping the weeds out in spring wheat. And you know, one thing that's really important for us is when we keep track of when that seed's going to start to germinate and come up to the ground. And when it's about like that, we go in with a tine weeder and do a blind pass before the seed comes up and just get that first flush of weeds. And I found this to be really important. You can also go in and tine weed this when it's at the 3 or 4 leaf stage. Now the problem here is the weeds are already a little bit bigger, so you have to be a little bit more aggressive. And I read some studies, I think from Denmark, that said isn't always a benefit to this pass. And so the last 2 years we actually have gotten the spring wheat in early, and that's certainly the most critical part. And I would say sometimes this is worth doing and sometimes I feel like it's not. Where you've got a really, really weedy field, I would say it is. So sometimes we air seed red clover in there on that pass if we want to establish, or you could establish a hayfield in there. This is a little set of slides that I've got, we'll look at it quickly. This is spring wheat, and this was one of those absolute disasters where we got it in late, it got really, really weedy, and this is when I had just gotten my tine weeder, and the thing was still scaring the hell out of me. First is the field pre-tine weeding, and it was going to be a train wreck. There was weeds all over the place. And the second is I tine weeded it one way, turned the tine weeder around, came back the same direction, and just basically buried the spring wheat under soil, dug it up completely. I went home that night completely nauseous. I told my sweetie, I think I just killed all our spring wheat. And I said, well, why don't you go out there with a camera and take some pictures of it, and let's see what the heck happens, you know? And you can see 2 weeks later, there was number 3, the stuff came up. Another week after that, you can see number 4, what that spring wheat looked like, and that was the cleanest spring wheat I ever had. And I think what happens is that tine weeder stimulated the tillering, buried the weeds, and the stuff, it sort of likes a good beating. So those of you who grow spring wheat, you know, thrash it hard, and it'll pay you back. So that's what the field looked like afterwards. I mean, we were kind of amazed. You know, I would say, and this was talked about, any of you who want to get into this value-added or just grow spring grain, And I think swathers are more of a way of a life out here in the upper Midwest. In New York, these things just aren't available. I had to get this out of Alberta. But this will save your ass, this thing. I mean, that has paid itself back so many times to be able to swath grain that got too weedy because we couldn't get on it or we got it in late, and then use the pickup head and just suck that stuff up. So I would say that's kind of a must-have piece of harvesting equipment, the head and the swather. So we would go in next after this, and we use a chisel plow with 22-inch ridge till sweeps on it to just cut like a big knife under the soil about 3 or 4 inches to dislocate the weeds from their roots, and then go in. We have a Lemken or we have a sunflower disc, and just disc that top little bit in, and we get really, really good weed control. It's really fast, and it doesn't take a lot of horsepower because you're not lifting anything. You're just slicing. Like, imagine a giant sword under the soil, just cutting the weeds. Next thing we like to do is we put a brassica in, and the reason I like brassicas because I don't have any brassicas in my rotation, and it's a great disease break crop, as is buckwheat. Buckwheat has no diseases with any other crop that I grow. You can see I'm growing a lot of grasses, so I got to do this. Other thing we like is any leftover N from the spring wheat that gets picked up. Brassicas are really good to have tap roots that go down. We're always trying to keep our soil loose from tillage. We use these forage brassicas or forage rape. They typically winter kill where I am. And the one thing I would say, and this is an important just note for any either seed producer or food grade producer, watch out what you plant as a cover crop because that could come back and get you later. I ordered in a whole bunch of tillage radish, and when I opened that bag up and looked at it, that's just like wild radish seed, and that stuff is really difficult to clean out of a food grade crop. So, if you're gonna use tillage radish, great, but you may end up with some hard seed or a weed problem that you're really not gonna want, and that's why I use a turnips or a forage rape, because the seed is small, and if there's hard seed in there, I can get it back out. So that's what it looks like. You see there's some cover on the soil, so the soil isn't completely bare there. You end up with something kind of pretty like that, and we've had good luck with this, and it makes excellent salad. So you can go out there and pick yourself a salad. That's sort of what the looks like after it's been winter killed. The other thing we use is a cover crop cocktail mix, and I love these cocktail mixes. I mean, they're super fun to experiment with. So that's one we've used and had pretty good luck with. There's it planted in a row. You can see some of our awesome New York soil. In amongst the rocks, things actually do grow, and the thing you have to realize about stones is because they take up so much area, you have to put less fertilizer and lime on to neutralize and/or fertilize the soil because the stones are taking up all that extra space. So there's advantages. There's another plus. You can make a beautiful bouquet for your sweetie when you're in the doghouse and got to come home on your hands and knees. So that's a little friend of mine made that out of our cover crop cocktail mix when it went to seed. And then, we'll plow that down and put corn in. So, and then we'll be back to year one, back to corn. So that's kind of our most basic rotation, just to see how that might be something in there that you can fit in or be useful to you. So the question is, what the hell does food grade mean anyway? People ask me, well, what is food grade? What do you have to do to be a food grade producer? Is it just grow the right crop, the right variety? Well, certainly the right variety is part of the equation, but that's not all we do. The food graded, and what I like about it is it's great feedback loop between the farm and the processor and the end user, or the farmer and the end user. And so I'm constantly getting feedback, negative and positive feedback about what I'm doing. And I use that to become a better farmer or try to refine my game a little bit. I'm not very proud, and I don't mind being criticized. And You know, if he tells me it sucks or this is wrong or it's got this in it, then I try to make my adjustments back at the farm. That's my partner, Greg, who runs the flour mill. I'm hoping he says the wheat looks good. It looks like. And so the other thing about food grade in this, I love people. I love the relationship building part of this. I mean, there's some cool people out there making bread, making whiskey, making beer, doing malt. These are two of my, Andrea and Christian from Valley Malt in Hadley, Mass, and Ben from Wormtown Brewery. He uses this Warthog wheat that we grow, and he loves it so much, he made a beer called Warthog Hefeweizen. So, you know, they want to come to the farm, they want to see the farm, they want to hang out, they want to go out to dinner and see what's going on. And, you know, some of these people have become some of my best friends, and they really actually enrich your life as a farmer. So this part of the whole food grade thing, if you're not a people person, I'd say, well, this might not be for you. Another thing about food grade is you got to start thinking food grade before you hit the combine, because if it's just at the very end, then it's a little too late. You know, it involves going out and scouting the field for disease problems. This is Glen Hard Red Spring, and that's Emmer, the light green stuff in the back, which is another spring grain. I spend a lot of time walking around in my fields looking at it, make sure things are all right. The other thing we do is we go out and rogue for weeds that we don't want in there. We don't want them going to seed, and we don't want them in there and harvest. You know, we have this really awesome technique where me and my sweetie go out with a quart jar with ice and G&T mix in there, and we walk back across the field and then have a little sip of G&T, and we walk back across the field. And it's a very effective way of getting them out and having a good time as well. So food grade means taking good samples, and everybody screws this up, but don't take one sample out of your truck. Like, take 5 so you get a representative sample. Helps you in terms of the quality grade because it's representative, and then the end user knows exactly what they're getting. You know, the other thing is always be cleaning all the time. Every time you move grain, when it comes in, you're taking out of the bin, we're always running it through barrel cleaners, getting an old little bin fan and blowing air across it. Everything clean, 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 clean. I can't say that enough time. The cleaner it is, the better it's going to keep. And storage. You can't store this on a barn floor. You can't get, you know, rats in there. People are going to come to your farm. They're going to look at your farm. And they're going to say, do I want to eat what came off of this farm? And if it isn't a neat farm, if the bins don't look clean, all of those sanitary things, that's really important for the image of you as a food grade producer. So, you know, why do this? You know, one of the first things I noticed when I got into farming from being an auto mechanic, you know, I used to buy a Volkswagen radiator from the importer for $75, and then we'd mark it up 100% and sell it, you know, for $150, and we made a lot of money that way. And then they would say that was too much and go down to VW dealer, and it was $450. You know, this is the way businesses make money. They buy low and they sell high. Well, what are we doing here, guys? Right? We're buying everything retail. You buy tractor parts, you buy oil. They're selling it to your retail, and then we're selling tractor trailer loads wholesale. I mean, this is the quickest way to lose money that you could possibly imagine. So, you know, I started thinking about how do we switch this situation around where the farmer is getting out of this backwards business model. Value added. Add some value to it. Capture some more of that dollar. You know, I read online right before this talk, average the farmer is getting from the $1 spent at the grocery store is 12 cents. 12 cents. That's it. Right? And so the lesson I learned when I was a kid growing up in town, my first farm job was working in a slaughterhouse because that was the best thing I could find to do that was near farm animals. So this guy had a small farm. It's right in the middle of the suburbs, and he couldn't make it as a pig farmer. He was a commercial pig farmer for a while, but that didn't work out. So what he decided was he was going to add some value to his hogs. So he put up this slaughterhouse, and he started killing pigs in there and selling cuts. And then he got into doing lambs and goats and all these different things. And so that was his value-added thing, and I didn't even think about it when I was working in there. But later on, when I became a farmer and started looking at this, I thought, you know what, that guy John DeMaria, he was smart. He was doing the right thing. So, you know, selling meat directly to the consumer, just a little value added by doing a bit of processing, and if you want to make it into cuts, he could have opened a restaurant and sold pork chops cooked and added that last little bit of value. But, you know, I started asking myself, you know, what on a grain farm, how could we do this? You know, how do you, you know, why sell it for the lowest price? You know, what is my package of pork chops here? And, you know, I decided I was going to start just start cleaning. You know, this is the farmer's equivalent of the package of pork chops. So bags of grain. The smaller the package you put it in, the more money you get for it. So, you know, we went out and bought a seed cleaner. And this doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can spend a lot of money on a seed cleaning operation and get really fancy with a lot of really expensive pieces of equipment. I have a $250 1910 Sydney 123 BE for a 3-screen cleaner, a gravity box, and 2 augers, and a whole bunch of screens. And each screen was $250. It cost me more than the cleaner. But with that system, I can clean seed, I can clean for the distilling market, I can clean for malt, I can clean for breweries. It's not difficult to run. If you can run a combine, you can run a seed cleaner. It's very intuitive. I figure that thing does about 2 tons an hour. I figure when I'm running that, I'm making $400 an hour with the increase in price. So, you know, that's the most profitable thing I have on my whole farm is that $250 Sydney cleaner. You know, don't get too fancy. You can also clean your own seed, and you just save a ton of money doing that, you know. And there, I just keep it simple. That's the take-home message with this whole thing. You know, it doesn't have to be fancy. There's us just putting some corn that we cleaned with a barrel cleaner into a tote and shipping it off to a distillery that's just going to grind it up and make moonshine out of it. It doesn't even have to be perfectly clean. You could even do that. You already got the auger. All you got to do is buy the totes. They're $15 a pop. So one big thing is, if you're going to get into this, you got to remember you're in the service industry now, and I was well trained because of my auto shop that the customer comes first. And so this can be a real pain in the neck during planting season when I'm out planting corn and I got to come back to the farm and load a truck. But you got to remember where your bread is buttered and where you're making most of your money. So stop farming and start loading is the motto at my place. And I'm always making sure that my customers are happy, that they get the grain that they need and that they never run out, which that can be a challenge. So these are some of the distilleries that I work with, just to give you an idea of where these prices can be and what you can get. And these are good prices. Wheat at $21, but there's a lot of extra work here. If you don't mind doing the work, if you don't mind doing the other things I said, this is a market that you can get into. And for us, it's been really helpful at keeping our farm up and running. There's for malting and breweries. Those are some of the prices we get. You know, we've started to sell bulk clean grain in tractor trailer loads, so we lowered the price a little bit to move more of it. You know, I never wanted to be a really big farm, but I always wanted to be a farm that didn't have off-farm income. That was always my goal. And, you know, this for me has been successful, and I think, you know, I don't know what the markets are. I'm blessed with New York City, which basically has an insatiable market for grains, it seems. But I think there is a lot of room and opportunity for people to get into this if you want to do it. So, you know, just to talk briefly about adding that last little bit of value, I'm not going to talk about baking bread, but, you know, just by taking something and changing the form of it, then you've added that last little tiny bit of value to it. And so that's where the flour mill really came in for me. I mean, very easy to do the processing on-farm flour milling. You know, when I got into this, I thought I could just set up something in the back of my barn, a grinder, and I'd throw some wheat in there and the flour would come out the bottom and I was gonna, you know, triple the price of it. And this is an incredibly nuanced process. And, you know, what we didn't know about this was stupendous. And I give my partners a lot of credit for learning it from the ground up and experimenting and turning it into something successful. Because I don't think that was easy. I know John and Haley are about to build a flour mill out at their place. And, you know, hopefully they're going to be calling us up and giving us a shot at helping them out with making that successful. And I will just put that out there. Anybody, I got no secrets. You want to come to my farm and see what I'm doing? I'll tell you about my markets. I'll show you everything I'm doing. You want to come to our flour mill? Harold Wilkins out in Illinois, he came with his son Ross. We took him to the flour mill. We showed him everything we were doing. We want more flour mills, more value added. We want grain farmers to make money. So if I can help you in any way, I'm here. And I'm willing to give you any advice that I've got, because I've probably made every mistake there is. Just to look at, you know, some of the prices we're paying to farmers. You know, at first this was just going to be something for myself to help me, but the ultimate goal for me was to help my neighbors out. Now I've got 10 other farms that are growing grain for us, and they're benefiting, getting the exact same price I'm getting from my farm. If you look at this, you know, the price we get for a pound of flour is about between 60 and 65 cents. So remember that figure I gave you, about 12 cents on the dollar that the farmer is getting in the store? Now you look at those prices and you look at the 60 cents that we're getting at the mill for our flour, and you'll see it's around 50% is going to the farmer. That's the way it should be. The farmer takes all the risk. Once it's at the mill, once the processor's got it, if the quality's there, there's basically almost no risk, you know? And this is the kind of thing we all have to think about, you know? If farming's gonna be sustainable, we need better prices too. There's no reason farmers should not make any money. This is really difficult. You all know that. There's a lot of risk involved. You've got a lot of capital investment. You know, our whole MO there is, let's help farmers make money. And so we pay good prices. We make a little less at the mill. You know, I got no problem with capitalism. I think it's awesome, but I think inherent in that system can be a bit of greed creeping in. And in certain instances, the pie is not cut up equally. And the farmer's at the short end of that little piece of pie almost always. And here is a way for us to take a little bit of control of what we're doing, capture a little more of that dollar, and help our neighbors out too. You know, I'm sure John and Haley, when their mill gets going, you all support them. They're going to start contracting from farmers around the state as well, and you can help them grow that business, and then maybe start some more small mills and help everybody succeed. So, you know, I'm nobody special. If I could do this, anybody could do it, and I'm certainly willing to help anybody who needs to learn about it get going and get started, because I feel like that's what we need to do, and that's the end of my talk. So.